Once I grew up and I started getting into comics, my favorite character now is Captain America.
When I was a kid, it was kind of odd because the only comic books I was allowed to read were Donald Duck comics and stories by Carl Barks. So really it would probably be Donald Duck, but I really liked Superman because they had Superman TV show that I watched.
Oh, I read comic books when I was a child as well as reading them as an adult. My favorite character is Wolverine.
As a kid, I got into comic books at the beginning of the Marvel age. I'd read some war comics, some Sergeant Rock, a little bit of the DC stuff, didn't like it, but then stumbled onto the Avengers and Fantastic Four, I think issues 3 and 4, things like that.
Well, I read a lot of comic books when I was a kid, and my favorite hero was Thor. The very first comic book I read was Journey into Mystery number 101 with Thor, and I was really into Norse mythology at the time, which is probably what drew me to it. So yeah, definitely Thor.
Well, I didn't read too many comic books when I was a kid. Not superhero comic books. The one comic book I followed a lot was G.I. Joe, which always surprises people, but that was my comic book.
I read a lot of comics when I was growing up. I think I was fond of Batman because he had no superpowers, and neither did I. So it gave me something to aspire to.
When I was a kid, I was not a huge comics reader, but I did have one favorite, and it was Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld.
Actually, I read the Metal Men comic books a lot when I was a kid, mostly because they were kind of odd and unusual, and they also had a lot of humor in them, and they weren't like most of the other superhero comic books.
When I was a kid, I read lots of comic books. My favorite was the Legion of Superheroes, and my favorite member of the Legion of Superheroes was Tenzil Kim from Planet Bismol, whose superhero name was Matter Eater Lad. He had the extraordinary power of consuming any form of matter.
She was amazing. She was Princess of Gemworld, but she came to Earth and she was trying to live as a normal girl, but then periodically had to go back and save her people who were being attacked. It was awesome.
Later on, I guess I would have to say Conan the Barbarian in the early Marvel comics done by Barry Smith.
As far as superheroes go, I watched a lot of TV. I was growing up when Wonder Woman and the Incredible Hulk and the Super Friends cartoon and Spider-Man and His Amazing Friends and Greatest American Hero. Out of all of those, of course, Wonder Woman is my favorite, just like every girl of my generation who grew up watching Linda Carter.
And what I really liked best was Spider-Man. He just was closer to my age, closer to my personality, and it was cool to see somebody, flying through the upper reaches of, Gotham City or Metropolis, or whatever the hell it was.
If the Amazing Bubbles got a drop on the Scarlet Witch, she could kick her ass. However, in any other circumstance, she's dead. I mean, the Scarlet Witch is stupidly powerful, and that's why I love her.
My favorite superhero, I have to say, is Iron Man. I always have been an Iron Man fan, even before the Civil War. And my Wild Cards character, the Recycler, his superpower is that he can form an armor around himself of whatever junk is in the vicinity. So it's very interesting. I never noticed how similar those two characters are.
It would really depend on the environment. I think if it was in an urban environment, my character, who can communicate with animals, would have a lot of animals to drive at Wolverine, but he could probably take them and he'd recover quickly.
Superman would be pretty tough for anybody to beat. My character, Captain Trips, actually had a number of different identities. He himself had no superpowers, but he could take potions and turn into various superpowered creatures.
Well, I have a couple of characters. One of them is Demise, who can kill you by looking at you. If he managed to do that to Thor before the hammer crushed him, then he could win. Now, my other character is a shapeshifter, and he would have no chance against Thor at all.
Well, I've got a bunch of wildcard characters, so I could pick and choose a little bit, but I still probably have to give the edge to Spider-Man. I'm gonna have one character who's got sort of the ability to lift and move objects, and Spider-Man could get him from afar.
My main wildcard character is a giant snail man who's the 4th richest person in the world. So I don't think that Matter Eater Lad would even get close to him, frankly.
Wow, in a face-to-face competition between Amethyst, Princess of Gemworld, and Natya, who is a Bharatanatyam dancer who also believes in truth and justice and saving people, I actually think they would very quickly team up and slaughter the bad guys.
Batman would lose, very clearly, against any of my wildcard characters.
Honestly have to think that Iron Man would win, because my guy is just a big, strong guy made of whatever trash is available in the vicinity, whereas Tony Stark is, well, a billionaire industrialist, philanthropist, sex symbol, and he's got repulsor rays. So, yeah, I mean, I love my guy, but I have to give the points to Iron Man on that one.
Now, if it were somewhere in Africa, if it were somewhere in the Rockies, where there were maybe some mountain lions around or some larger predators, she would have a really good shot at taking out Wolverine.
Starshine, who was fairly superpowered himself and could fly in space, might give Superman a run for his money, but I think the others would probably fall victim to one or another of Superman's amazing array of powers.